Salam sejahtera, Anda bersama saya Rizal Zulkapli dan ini Niaga AWANI. Pada Isnin kami bawakan laporan perbahasan Belanjawan 2021 oleh Ketua Pembangkang Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim. Antara perincian adalah persoalan tentang unjuran pertumbuhan ekonomi dan hasil daripada cukai korporat dan pendapatan.
Antara yang disentuh termasuk unjuran pertumbuhan ekonomi negara pada 2021 pada kadar antara 6.5% hingga 7.5% yang beliau sifatkan tidak realistik.
Dari mana Menteri Kewangan dapat unjuran yang begitu hebat dan tinggi ini? Atau untuk memenuhi selera politik untuk meyakinkan bahawa kita boleh capai pertumbuhan yang begitu meyakinkan? Unjuran tidak semestinya tepat, saya faham. Dan banyak kali ada kesilapan-kesilapan. Tapi unjuran harus realistik. Harus menunjukkan bahawa ada kesungguhan menyatakan yang benar, bukan untuk mengeliukan.
Dalam perbahasannya, Anwar yang juga pengerusi Pakatan Harapan menyentuh anggaran kutipan cukai korporat untuk tahun 2021 iaitu sekitar 64.6 bilion ringgit. Beliau berkata unjuran tersebut tidak munasabah selepas mengambil kira kesan COVID-19 ke atas ekonomi negara seperti penutupan syarikat-syarikat, pembuangan pekerja dengan jumlah yang banyak dan sebagainya. Sementara itu, Pengarah Belanjawan Negara Johan Mahmud American berkata Kementerian Kewangan menggunakan cara yang sama digunakan seperti tahun-tahun sebelum ini dalam merangka belanjawan tersebut.
Tiap tahun pihak kami sediakan belanjawan berdasarkan kaedah dan pendekatan yang sama. Saya rasa tidak beza kaedah yang digunakan untuk penyediaan belanjawan pada tahun ini. Jika sebelum ini dia tidak banyak berbeza selain daripada isu di mana ada krisis yang terjadi selepas pembentangan bajet, tapi saya rasa berdasarkan maklumat yang ada dengan Kementerian Kewangan, itulah unjuran yang pihak kami rasa adalah memaparkan keadaan yang sebenarnya.
Terdahulu antara yang disentuh Ahli Parlimen Port Dickson termasuk unjuran pendapatan yang mengelirukan, pemindahan wang untuk dijadikan pendapatan kerajaan dan peruntukan yang tidak sepatutnya kepada perbelanjaan pembangunan. Anwar turut tegaskan Belanjawan 2021 hanya akan disokong jika ia benar-benar untuk bantu rakyat menghadapi pandemik COVID-19 dan mengekang wabak itu. Dalam masa yang sama, beliau turut meminta kerajaan membatalkan cadangan untuk mengembalikan Jabatan Hal Ehwal Khas Jasa dan peruntukan 85.5 juta ringgit untuk tujuan itu disalur kepada kegunaan Barisan Harapan bukan anggota kesihatan.
Dan kita ingin bincangkan berkenaan percukaian dan juga pendapatan negara dalam Belanjawan 2021 serta bagaimana pembayar cukai akan mendapat manfaat daripada Belanjawan 2021 bersama rakan kongsi percukaian dan juga Ketua Pasaran Percukaian Malaysia Ernst Young Tax Consultant Sdn Bhd Farah Rosley. Izinkan saya meneruskan dalam bahasa Inggeris. Farah, let's first look at the personal income tax release and the reduction by 1% for the chargeable income band of 50,001 ringgit to 70,000 ringgit. Is this enough to provide taxpayers with the extra cash flow needed for 2021?
Yep, good morning Rizal, and good morning everyone. Hope everyone is in the best of health. The reduction of the 1% income tax means that particular band would be reduced from 14% to 13% tax rate, and this will mean putting money back to the economy. And of course, the intent is to try to elevate the tax burden of the individuals. But if you really look at what does this 1% means, this 1% will translate to roughly about 200 ringgit tax savings per year, and that's for the whole year, where your tax payment will be reduced by 200 ringgit. Well, the amount is not seen as significant, but I would say still 200 ringgit is still money. Money that can be used by the taxpayers, by the individuals to pump back to the economy, to buy goods, to buy the basic necessity needs. But what happened here is that the government's revenue will be reduced. During the budget, it was announced that this will benefit, I remember, 1.4 million taxpayers, right? So this 1.4 million result will mean that this will be a reduction of, if I take the 200 ringgit per individual, of about 280 million ringgit of government's revenue that will be reduced just merely by giving a 1% tax reduction. But this initiative is not new, because the government will need to look at, how they can support the individuals and the taxpayer better. But what I would like to touch on a little bit, Rizal, is if we look at our band, because we're talking, just I mentioned 14% to 13%.
Yep.
In Malaysia, we have almost 10 to 11 personal tax ban, and that's just too many, ranging from 1% up to 30% for the highest income earners. But if you look at other countries like the UK, for example, they only have 3 income tax ban, and the income tax ban were 20, 40, and 45%. Yeah, so what I'm saying is then that if we want to actually encourage people to continue to pay taxes, which will help contribute to the government's revenue, we must try to simplify the taxes. And Riza, I forgot to mention, you mentioned a little bit about tax reliefs that was announced. I thought the tax relief that was announced was timely because it covers medical treatment, special needs for carer expenses. For example, they call it penjagaan ibu bapa. And then there's also relief for disabled spouse. And if you look at the relief that was granted, the relief is quite high. From 5,000 ringgit to 8,000 ringgit. For the relief for spouses is from 3,500 ringgit to 5,000 ringgit. And also there's also enhancement to the lifestyle tax relief, which was increased from 2,500 to 3,000 ringgit. So that is a lot of reliefs on top of that 1%, reduction in the tax rate, which is hoped to support more of the M40 group, because the B40 group are the groups that likely will not be in the tax-paying bracket. So they likely will not be paying taxes. So all these reliefs is hopefully will give a bit of relief result to the M40 category.
But how soon will they get these reliefs and reduction? Because it's not immediate, right? As opposed to, say, cash handouts or moratorium or the KWSP or EPF withdrawal that people have voiced that they wanted on social media.
Yeah, good question, Rizal. The relief will only be enjoyed technically, if I say next year, when we submit our tax returns, right? And it is with effect from, it is different from based on different reliefs. Some are with effect from 2021. But what can be done is the estimates where the deduction monthly is being paid by the employee. What can be done is to revise the monthly tax deductions that's been paid by the employee, and that will give a little bit more cash back to the pockets of the taxpayers.
And what about windfall tax? People on social media were quite disappointed that windfall tax on sectors boosted by COVID-19 was not included in Budget 2021. This could probably help with the revenue, looking at the amount of rebates and reductions announced by the government, and also the reduction that you mentioned earlier.
Result, there were lots of talks about perhaps maybe new taxes will be introduced. Yeah, and I remembered reading, and I was also called to give some comments on this. There were no new taxes that was introduced. Last year, we introduced digital tax, if you remember, Riza, and that was quite a big topic as well. Just a few months before that, almost a year, the sugar tax was introduced, or soda tax was introduced. But this year, there are no new taxes. Perhaps my suspicion is because to support and elevate the already currently soft economy and businesses, so no new surprises in terms of taxes. But if you look at the question that you had on windfall tax, what was agreed was the 4 glove makers have agreed to contribute 400 million ringgit. So in a way, it is a contribution instead of a tax, and it's still a collection for the government in order for them to use that for the purpose of the country's development or operational expenditure.
But do you foresee revenue for 2021 to be much lower with the tax rebates and perhaps lower tax collection? Do you think maybe there are other ways that the government could have increased revenue, expand the current SST coverage, for example? Could this maybe be introduced in the future outside of the Budget 2022 announcement, probably, especially with the 2.5% inflation target for 2021? Yeah,
could be, Rizal. If you look at the government's expenditure, for budget 2021, it was 322.5 million ringgit, right? And out of that, about 41% is coming from income tax, and 13%, if I'm not mistaken, is coming from indirect taxes. So a whopping amount of about 51 to 52% is actually coming from tax collection alone. So clearly, with all the reliefs, with the reduction in taxes, no new taxes that comes in, businesses are not really making the profits that they used to make in the past. Lesser profits means lesser taxes. If businesses are making losses, surely there's no tax collection. So the reduction in profitability means reduction in taxes as well. And you're right, Rizal, there will be pressure for the government to continue to collect money in order to sustain the country's development and as well as operating expenditure. But we shall not forget that while GST is not introduced, or a broader type of consumption taxes, or what you say, broadening the current service tax scope is not being made. But I suspect, and please don't quote me, I suspect that maybe a certain type of consumption type of tax may be introduced. And in addition, the finance bill has not been released, and it could be released this week, and there could be possibility that there could be some provisions that's going to be introduced. Let's wait and see what is the content of the finance bill, or maybe some widening of the current SST scope, or introduction of certain mechanism in order to enable the government to collect additional revenue.
And Farah, what do you make of the new tax on tobacco products?
Yeah, tobacco is, if people call it sin tax, or somebody told me it's Cukai dosa, but and it's always a form of tax to discourage consumption. But the challenge with that isn't that with that being the tax being introduced, people resort to illegal tobacco, which is I've always been reading that illegal tobacco causes more health hazard than already cigarette is causing health hazard. Illegal tobacco is causing that even worse health condition for its consumer. And by introducing a higher tax, it would there's a school of thought that says that this will encourage further smuggling, illicit trade in tobacco. But what I will say is then that the financial flows, the government is actually losing a lot of money from smuggling activities, and the new tobacco rule and tax that's been introduced, excise that's been introduced, is actually to stop further leakages by the government. So this is one measure, and the budget also talks about the process of importation of tobacco products, right? It talks about the tobacco products can only be sent through consignment through a few ports only, and this is also another measure to try to reduce smuggling activities and illicit trade on tobacco, and hopefully plug the hole on the loss of revenue from tobacco.
And Farah, lastly, a comprehensive study on the existing tax incentive structure is underway to provide a competitive, transparent and more attractive incentive framework. That's from the budget tax. What suggestions do you have for the government for this?
Rizal, as announced during budget 2021, the government has already embarked on a comprehensive review and revamp of the incentive framework, and this was already announced back, I remember, in budget 2020 itself. And they are looking at pre-packaged incentives, they are looking at other incentives that could support the flow of foreign investor into Malaysia. So my hope is then that the government will continue to focus to attract foreign direct investors, and of course not to forget local or domestic investments as well. Continue to put Malaysia in the map as an attractive investment location. We are known to be cost competitive. We've got good labour market, and this incentive hopefully will continue to attract foreign investor into Malaysia. The relaxation of the principal hub incentive, which was announced, Rizal, and that will be extended to 2022. And then there's a new global trading center incentive, which is, I hear, similar to what we have in Singapore, and that's preferential tax. Instead of paying 24% corporate tax, the businesses will only pay 10%. Yeah, and further extension of different sectors incentive, like those in the science, aerospace industry, and the hope is then that these investments will generate spillover effect to the economy. And in terms of local spending, job creation, skills being transferred, technology being transferred, additional tax collection, of course, and trade surplus. And but having said all that, Rizal, it is crucial for the investment conditions imposed by the government to also be realistic and proportionate to the level of investment. Yeah. So sometimes we announce the incentive, what's available. We are able to attract investors to come, but what we must make sure is then that when we execute, the execution must also be equally well done.
On that note, we thank you very much Farah Rosley, rakan kongsi percukaian dan Ketua Pasaran Percukaian Malaysia, Ernst Young Tax Consultants yang berhad membincangkan berkenaan dengan cukai dan juga pendapatan dalam Belanjawan 2021. Kita akan berhenti berehat seketika, kembali selepas ini.